It's member-supported Hawaii Public Radio and All Things Considered. I'm Dave Lawrence, and thrilled we're having a little get-together here with a band that are in town through Sunday at the Blue Note Hawaii. It's the Average White Band. I'm joined by two original remaining members of the group. It's a real thrill. We've got Alan Gorrie, guitarist and also bass guitarist and vocalist, Onnie McIntyre, and guitarist and vocalist with the band. Aloha, Alan.
Mahalo.
And aloha, Onnie.
Mahalo.
Good to have you here, and you did get it right. It sounded good too.
Mahalo.
Sounded very good.
You emphasize the second syllable.
However you mahalo.
Mahalo.
Mahalo. Mahalo for your time.
A different era, but
What's that?
a different era.
Yeah,
I
look.
remember getting a fruit bowl from Tom Moffat when we did the HIC arena for the first time, and it said "Aloha and Mahalo from Hawaii loves you" or something like that on 1976.
Was that and that was your first time, and then on stage I heard you say something 30 years ago was your last time here.
38.
38.
38 years ago, believe it or not.
Wow, so it was at 78 then. Is
The
that
last time we played in Honolulu.
so? You did two. Some reading into it. You had a couple. How many did you do? How many before that last one? Did you do several?
Before that at the HIC.
Say again.
We did two before that at the HIC, which is now called something else. I believe.
Blaisdell Arena.
There you go. And 75 and 76, I think. The second time was with Tom Moffat.
Okay. Well, yeah, and he's still doing some shows too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, Tom's still doing some stuff.
Yeah, give him our regards because he's an old friend and a great promoter. You know, he's the real deal. You know,
Any particular memories or experiences from those shows that stick out?
and nothing we could repeat on the air probably, but there were. Well, yes, I'll tell you. One was repeatable, and this is a historic moment in any band's history. The night we sat in a restaurant and watched the manager smash the place up in front of us at Nick's Fish Market.
Oh wow, it's right around the corner from where I live.
And Mark, who was the manager, we'd been at a party at his house the night before, and I think he was still blitzed the next night. So we were sitting at this long table, and he came in and proceeded to demolish the place.
Rockstar style.
And we sat there going, "There's something wrong with this picture. We're supposed to be Keith Moon. You're supposed to be throwing us out." It was a moment in time.
That's definitely an unusual. So as manager of the restaurant, trashing the place, maybe for a little insurance purposes. Any memories on your end, Onnie, that stick out?
Yeah, no, it was just I had one.
Hard to top that, huh?
It is. I mean, if you remember it, you weren't there. But anyway, no, great time. Absolutely great time. I loved Hawaii the first couple of times we were here, and went to Maui and hung out. And some of us played golf, and some of us went on surfboards and did all sorts of strange things. I went out to sea one time on a catamaran, and I fell asleep, and I drifted way out. And Alan remembers seeing me this tiny dot in the distance.
You call for rescue.
Not quite. I managed to get back, but the day before, which I didn't know about, there was a whale in the same area, which might have been rather interesting.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes, as adorable as they are, they can be a little difficult if you get too close.
But a great time.
Yeah, and it's great that you're back and you've got an extended run. This is cool for people in the islands. A lot of different folks have been checking in with us, saying that they're excited to have you back in the islands, and I had not realized that the gap in your last date had been so long. Your set list, if you can, there's R&B latest record. I was listening to the mention of it on the stage, and if you can kind of paint a picture for folks who are interested in coming out to the shows, how you run through your set list and maybe how you put it together with the kind of discography that you've got.
Well, it's a combination of, on a first night especially, because you're not quite sure what the makeup of the audience is going to be. So it's guesswork on night one. And since we have two shows, we try and just make it a little different each show. Instead of doing the same show twice, even though it's not the same audience twice, we change things around just so we don't go nuts. You know, we get to try and play as many things as possible on the night. So this tour, this week here, we're trying to make sure we play everything that's on the AWB R&B CD, which was, after all, a live recording from Austin, Texas last November. One of those lucky nights where we got it all in one take, one night, no overdubs, no anything. I mean, I think we fixed one or two things in the studio because of a couple of squeals and technical things, not because of playing or lack thereof. It was just, I mean, it was a magic night. Normally when you do a live album, you'll record 4, 5, 6 nights, and then you have agonizing month in the studio picking which takes from which night to combine into the finished piece. And we were really, really lucky and got the whole thing in one set, you know. Very, very lucky, and that's what the album is, and we're trying to play all of that throughout the 5 nights that we're here. You know, we'll play all these tunes. We'll play a whole lot more than that, but we have to keep ourselves interested as well. So we chop and change from set to set, and again, it's a case of figuring out what the demographic might be and what they're going to enjoy most. And tonight, really, we just tried to play as broad a spectrum as we could for the first set, so we could see what the feedback was, and sort of we'll base the second set on some of that.
That's a smart way to do it, and it's an unusual crowd here in Waikiki because you got tourists, you got local people. It's a bit of a
well, it's like that in BB King's in New York, right, where you're. I mean, you could analogize that this is kind of the Times Square of Honolulu here in this bit of Waikiki. It seems that way to me with the amount of tourists and everybody around. So there's bound to be some of that walk up people coming in and going, "Who the hell are they? I've not heard of them before."
We just need a stage deli if we're going to make it like a Times Square.
It's closed, and so is the Carnegie. Closed last week.
Closed for good?
For good.
Really, the car?
Oh my Lord!
Yeah, it closed this past week. The Carnegie went down. I mean, it's been running on empty for the last 6 or 9 months or something. But no, that's it. He's gone. He's no more.
I used to love my half sours over at that place, the pickles.
Where the hell are we going to get our calories?
Right.
It should be called the Calorie Deli, really.
When I think about, you mentioned being interested in for, you know, have to be interested in it to play and keep yourself interested and utilize the set list in that way. When you think about your development to be a musician, going back to being a kid, we'll start with you, Onnie. The first ways that music became a part of your life and that influenced you to then pick up an instrument and devote yourself to it for what has been a remarkable career.
I don't remember, you know, suddenly realizing that music is it. It's always been there, and it's all I ever wanted to do.
Who was exposing it to you first?
My mother. She played piano, and she had to practice because she took up. She'd studied in school and at the Athenaeum in Glasgow for her LRAM, London Royal Music course. The Depression killed that, so she couldn't do that. But she just loved to play in front of people and for people, especially children. And she took up country. She got a gig playing for country dance music, and I would come home from school, and you know, the ornaments would be bouncing off the off the shelves because she would be doing all this. And it's, you know, Scottish country dance music is very rhythmical. It's all about dancing, and you know, it's everything's very, very rhythmical and staccato and a lot of energy. Right. And a lot of notes she had to play, so she really had to practice hard because the gigs were like for maybe 3 hours non-stop, and people had to dance to it, so it was a strict tempo. And Scottish music is a very strict tempo, so that was my first influence of music. And then of course when rock and roll broke when I was about 12, Alan would remember that, about 1956 when, you know, Elvis came out and Little Richard and there was no question.
Elvis came out to your house.
He did. I mean, he came in. Closest he got was Prestwick Airport. He stopped off at Prestwick Airport on his way to Germany in 1960. You know, and you know, rock and roll was it for me.
What made you want to pick up the guitar?
Just listening to radio. And
how old were you when you?
12.
12 years old.
Yeah, on my 12th birthday, I got a guitar.
And that's an age when a lot of folks actually had that opportunity. Yourself, what do you think, Alan, in terms of pivotal moments and maybe as Onnie pointed to Mom, if you can point to a figure or figures that were influential in this process?
Well, in my case, it was my dad. He was a piano player too, and he was a band leader. in Perth in Scotland, and he was also the arranger. He transcribed. In those days, it was all sheet music, so he would sit up way into the small hours transcribing for violins and alto sax and whatever, because they were all in different keys. So he would take the piano copy and transcribe everything. So he'd be burning the midnight oil doing that, and I could never sleep when he was doing that, so I kept kind of wandering in and going, "You still up? Okay, this is what you do." And I'd go and sit at the rehearsals and things like that on a Sunday afternoon and just watch how it was done, not taking any notice really of how it was done, but it eventually seeped in that band leading runs in the family. And that's it. He was a jazz fanatic. He was Fats Waller, Art Tatum, James P. Johnson, all that stuff, and the big bands of the time, and Ellington and Basie and all that stuff. So those were the records that I grew up with. So really, the R&B of its day, that was my background.
And that's it's a good segue into, Average White Band. You're known for this funk sound that it caught people's eye, certainly the makeup of the band, but obviously something had caught your ear that you guys gravitated in the direction that you did. If you can kind of describe how, because, I hear the rock and roll thing from Onnie, and I hear some mention of jazz from you, but talk about how you begin to dial in the sound on what you became really known for, which was basically funk.
Yes, funk, but melodic funk, with a lot of craft in the writing, in the lyrical sense, and it wasn't just bump the bump, everybody do the bump. There was a lot of that at that time. Mm-hmm. We never wanted to just kind of stay in that channel. We always wanted to make it something that was much more rounded, and that's probably because we were white guys from Scotland. We had a different take on doing the R&B thing. But I mean, if you think of all the influences that we had, the Isley Brothers, Marvin Gaye, all these people, Stevie Wonder, and so on, even Stevie Winwood, and great singers from over there. All these guys were of a kind, of an R&B kind, and then you throw in James Brown, it's like throwing gunpowder into the mix. It was like throwing a grenade in. That's what kicked us into top gear. All of us, whatever other things we loved, we all loved James Brown and the JBs. And that was kind of the template that we hung the core of the band on. And all the other things were our influences from, as I say, Marvin and Stevie and Isley Brothers and Al Green and the Beatles and John and Paul. Two of the greatest singers of all time. One of the greatest duos there will ever be. Those two guys singing together.
Yeah, vocalists.
Yeah. Add to that.
People forget that they were such good vocalists. And soulful. And so they were an R&B band, same as we are. We are an R&B band, but they wrote.
Talking about John and Paul.
John and Paul, absolutely. Their influences were the same as what we did, but we came to them. We came to our music through them. But talking about getting back to James Brown, coming back from school one day, and I went to a friend's house, and he said, "You got to listen to this record." And it was James Brown live at the Apollo, 1962, the first. And I've never been the same since.
It's a life-changing record for a lot of folks.
It certainly was for me. I'd come up with the rock thing, and because that was what was coming up at the time, and that was the age I was at the time. When I heard James Brown, it changed everything. It was all about space and groove, and and discipline. And then when we put this band together, Robbie was original drummer. That was his whole thing. Was stick to the groove. You find a groove and you stick to it. And I used to try and speed up. And he said, "Didn't speed up. Stay where it is. Keep it down. What do you play that for? Leave spaces." It was all about spaces. You play a few notes and you leave a space. And somebody said that, but recently I heard an interview, and they were talking about Miles Davis. Miles didn't play blah, 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 all the time. It's all about spaces and finding the right note at the right time. And that is what it's all about. And if you combine that with what James did, and he wasn't a great musician. He wasn't a musician at all, really, but he just had a vision of what the sound should be. And, God, life-changing.
Well, there's a lot to that sound. I just had the band Hiroshima on. They were on a few different times recently, and Dan Kuramoto, leader, was talking about something that Dizzy had told him, and it was very much about it's what you're not playing. That it's that and it's hard to paraphrase, but I know as you're speaking, I know precisely the kind of sentiment you were talking about, because the silence and the space in between the notes is a huge. It sets the next note up. It's what sets up what you're playing is what you're not playing. So I it makes a lot of sense.
It's hard to do that. That's a very hard thing to do. Yeah, you've got to be very, very confident to be able to do that, to hold back and leave the space. That's where Robbie really taught us as a band. You know,
he had an education that we hadn't. He had been with a group that backed a lot of the visiting American R&B acts through Europe. Benny King, Garnet Mims, the Drifters, a few more whose names I can't, Edwin Starr, and several others. He was in the backing band, so he was 16 years old, and he was getting whipped to death by these band leaders, the black band leaders from New York or wherever, and they were kicking his ass. And, you know, so by the time he was 18, he was a seasoned, Shetland circuit pro. We were older than him, but he knew 10 times as much as us. So he came in with that whole space discipline thing. And it's the same as writing lyrics. It's what you don't write that makes a song as opposed to just a piece of script, a piece of writing. You know, it's no longer a libretto. It's an actual. It's a piece of funk. They look at Person to Person. We sat in a little cupboard at the corner of the studio, Hamish and I, and wrote the lyrics in about 20 minutes, because these guys were waiting for us to put down a vocal. We didn't have anything. We just had the title Person to Person, Face to Face, right? So, we wrote down our ideas, and then Hamish had the good sense to leave most of them out. He just said, telephone line, bad connection, and I'm half asleep. And it's just these little thoughts. All the buts and ands and ifs and so's, we left them out. And it was genius, because it was what you don't put in that made the sentences work as a song, as opposed to a piece of, a script.
And it gives it a unique syntax. It's also what you're talking about when you do stuff like that with the music, and that's a great example.
When you pay for your problems, syntax.
There's always a tax somewhere.
There's plenty of taxes out there. Guy, we've talked a little bit about rock stuff being a factor in the relationship to your sound, and there's also, I was hoping you could fill in the blanks on how 73, I guess it was, Clapton, it's credited that era, and I guess who was the guy? It was Bruce McCaskill was the manager who assisted in getting you guys a spot that would end up being important for your development.
Bruce McCaskill, and to his credit, Robin Turner, who had been he was Robert Stigwood's right-hand man. He was our actual manager at the time in London in the early days and in their formative days. He, of course, and Bruce McCaskill had been Eric's roadie. He'd been with Eric through the Derek and the Dominoes period and the Delaney and Bonnie stuff and everything. So Bruce facilitated quite a lot of that, and he was responsible for bringing us to the States. But yeah, the 73 was the Rainbow concert, Eric's reintroduction to the music business, and of course everybody from the music business in London was there. Everybody, and a whole lot of people from the States flew in for that gig. Who were all in the audience. I mean, if the spotlights hadn't been so bright, we would have crapped ourselves when we'd seen who was in the audience. Honestly, McCartney was in the audience, Lennon was in the audience. We didn't see them because the lights are there. Thank goodness. Otherwise, we would have,
would have made the gig a lot more difficult.
It would have, yeah. As it was, we had a friend of ours who was a DJ, and he'd set up his turntables and everything in our dressing room. So we had our own disco sort of going backstage. It was a wild night. It was fantastic.
We got complaints from the stage manager because we were too loud. We were drowning out the band that was on. We were distracting the band, Clapton's band that was on, who was led by Pete Townsend, who, put the thing together for Eric. Eric had been out of commission for a couple of years due to his problems.
Little realising that he was really launching the Average White Band at the same time.
And that's how stuff like that happens sometimes. Sometimes it'll be like that.
Yeah, it does. It happens. Yeah, it is serendipity. Absolutely.
We mentioned JB, and big fan myself. And it was an honor to get to see him several different times when he was alive, and God bless him. But I understand Pick Up the Pieces got the attention of the JBs, and then they sort of returned the favor in a way. I mean, not a lot, and that has happened throughout music. There will be times when other bands get referenced or songs get referenced, but that had to make you feel really special.
Everybody borrows from everyone else, absolutely. And we were so influenced by James, and when Pick Up the Pieces, when the melody idea came up for it, we everybody just automatically played the parts that we thought would fit. And it was obviously like JB's tribute to Pass the Peas.
Right.
Pick Up the Pieces, Pass the Peas. That's where Alan got the idea for the Pick Up the Pieces title, which was just a chant like the JBs would do. Mm-hmm. Pass the Peas, Pass the Peas.
Fred Maceo.
Absolutely.
Monsters.
Maceo is a huge hero of ours. And it was really the JBs that influenced us an awful lot.
And then they did that tune as like the Pick Up the Pieces.
Well, the funny thing was that when we met the JBs and when they came to New York, Hamish and I went down to the Lone Star Cafe, and we met James, which was amazing. And he came out and said hello and appreciated what we were doing and all the rest of it. And then the rest of the band came out and they were saying, when Pick Up the Pieces came out, everybody thought it was us. And they're going, like the JBs. And JBs are going, hey, ain't us. It's some Scottish guys. Right. It's some white band from Scotland.
And that was sort of the name of the band. I read it came from a British diplomat, Rab Wiper. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah, whether he was the first to use it or not, I'm not sure. But he had a phrase or saying that was a comparative for he'd been on station in Bangkok. How is Bangkok, Rab? Oh, it's too hot for the average white man. So the average white man was a phrase that was sort of bandied around our whole collective. And when we were fumbling and stumbling for a name, why don't we, you can't call a band that. Well, maybe we could. Since we don't play average white rock music, it would be a nice irony to, let's try it. And we did. And apparently it worked.
That's really that's a neat way to have had something come to be. You taking a look at a? Yeah, no problem with that. So I think about there was a collaborative record that you guys got to do, Benny and Us, Benny King. You talk a little bit about how that came to be.
Benny was one of the artists that Robbie worked with. So in a way, it was a sort of a late tribute to Robbie that we wanted to do the record with Benny. We did a single that Atlantic, it was their idea to do Star in the Ghetto. So we did this single with Benny down in Florida while we were making another album. Our album wasn't going so well. I mean, we were running out of ideas. We were like a riverbed. We were drying up because we were on the road all the time. Atlantic wanted more records. You can't tour to promote the last one and write another one. The two things do not go together. It's Picasso might have been able to do it, but he could paint in his sleep. But it was difficult, and so this worked out so well. This one session, we said, let's do an album and just go and have fun. So we all got on a plane, went up to New York to Atlantic Studios, and in 2 weeks we cut this entire album with Benny, which was wonderful. It was great fun for him. It reintroduced him to a younger audience through our audience, and we got a taste of working with Benny, who was such a beautiful soul, wonderful guy, great musician and singer. And we saw why Robbie had such an affection for him. So honestly, Robbie was sitting on our shoulders while we made that record, and that was one of the joys of doing it.
You have any particular memories that stick out that you want to share from doing that record?
The fact that we did the album in Atlantic Studios was a huge thing, but also that Luther was on the album as well, which was and he wasn't really that well known at
Luther Vandross?
Luther Vandross, and his ideas during the session for vocal ideas were just amazing. Never mind his vocal input and everything. So that was also introduced Alex Lidgerwood, who is from Glasgow.
Went on to be in Santana.
Yeah, went on to be with Santana. I mean, I saw him in 1965 in a little club in Glasgow, and he started singing. I went, here's in my back of the neck.
Right.
Stood up.
Mind-boggling vocal.
Holy crap! Who is this guy? Absolutely amazing. So that really stands out, and it was nice to be able to do songs that were Benny made famous. So.
It's a huge testament to who you guys were too, and it's a one of many parts of a remarkable career. Alan Gorrie, Onnie McIntyre, it's Average White Band, spending some time here with me during their run at the Blue Note in Waikiki, which is going on through Sunday. Hope you had fun chatting today. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, we could go on for hours like this, actually. This is a lot of fun, because revisiting the influences and the things that have brought us this far, and to be back here after all this time, it's kind of like bringing things full circle. So thanks for the opportunity.
You're quite welcome. Hope you had fun, Onnie.
Absolutely. It's been great. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.